Usually I am connecting with you all from Jersey City, but today I am in North Carolina. I'm actually at my mom's house on my way back to Jersey. I was in North Carolina all week for a retreat. So I'm grateful to be here with y'all and pick up our conversation. I know that you all met together in December, so I want to make time to hear about that, but I wanted to first make the space for you all to do your normal opening. Whoever wants to do that.
Yes, I'll do that. So let's sit upright, close our eyes. Just take a moment to ground ourselves in the present. Let's chant Om 3 times. And we'll chant the opening sloka that we often chant for meditation, the Om Karam sloka. Let's inhale to chant Om. 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 Omkaram bindu samyuktam nityam dhyayanti yoginaha kamadam mokshadam chaiva Omkaraya namo namaha. Om united with the source on which the yogis ever dwell, grants desires and liberation. Salutations to the Omkaram. Om Shanti.
Thank you so much, Ramananda. Thank you all for being here today. I want to take a moment to just go around and check in with everyone, see how you're doing, and also refresh my own memory about your names and pronouns. So if you could go around and just share your name, your pronouns, and where you're located, and one thing that you are finding connects you to joy in 2023. So I'll model. I'm Kelly Nicole Palmer. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am on Sugary and Catawba land in Charlotte, North Carolina today. And one thing that is bringing me lots of joy in 2023 is collaging. And for efficiency, we'll pop it to people. So I'm going to pop it over to Mukti Devi.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Mukti Devi, she, her, hers. I'm in my home in San Francisco. And what I did enjoy was the break in the storms the other day. I know we need the rain, but it's been pretty intense lately here in San Francisco in the Bay Area. But just happy to be here with the roof over my head and having being present with my Sangha brings me joy that we're all still here together. Thank you. Oh, I will pick Susan.
Hi, I'm Susan Ford, San Francisco, and I am really enjoying 2023. I feel like I feel a sense of being really settled in my body and just in life, and I've am doing the 21-day meditation, which is just a really wonderful thing. It's really bringing back. I had lost my solid meditation and practice, and it feels like I'm starting to build a new one that feels really right. So that brings me a lot of joy. And Sarani.
Hi, I'm Sarani, she, her, hers. I'm on Ohlone land in Berkeley. And I did a craft project yesterday with my granddaughter and grandson, and just hanging out with them is always a source of joy for me. So I would say that. And also I'll say Alan will be here later. He's at our grandson's basketball game. So that for both of us, I think it's just a real primary source. So so happy to be here. Thank you. And I'll pass it to Raisa.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Raisa, she, her, hers. And I'm in San Francisco, Ohlone land, a couple of blocks from Integral Yoga Institute. And I'm really grateful to be healthy. I was sick for about 6 weeks. And I feel like that is helping me to somehow experiencing that long period of time being not healthy in the body. I feel like I connected a little bit more with the light, and I feel like that will be my guiding for the 2023, connecting even deeper with the light. Thank you. Oh, and Prashanti.
Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year. My name is Marie Prashanti Goodell. I live in Ohlone land in San Francisco. What is bringing me joy so far this year is taking time to prep and make delicious food. I spent probably 12 hours yesterday chopping and sauteing and whatever, and making about 3 or 4 dishes that will help us through the week. And it feels really good to be connected to the nature of making food and then the joy of eating that with family and friends. So that was beautiful for me. And I'm going to tag Sneha.
Snehan, he, him, his. And virtualistically, I'm floating somewhere in the Himalayas, but realistically, I'm in my room at the ashram. What's brought me a lot of joy, all these people know that I've been getting so much enjoyment from playing the harmonium and working with my voice in chanting kirtan. And I'll choose Ramananda.
Thank you. I'm Ramananda. I'm also here at the Institute, which is on Ramaytush Ohlone land. My pronouns are he and his. What am I enjoying? I think what's giving me joy so far this year is I've seen some great basketball games and football games on TV. And a couple of games into overtime, really exciting. So that's been kind of a fun for me. It's one of my passions since childhood. And it's a good indoor activity when it's so inclement outside. And I'll pass it to Keiko.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Keiko. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I live in San Francisco near Haight-Ashbury district, the birthplace of the hippie movement, I guess. This holiday season was pretty interesting that I decided to reach out to the people I haven't talked for a while
And I found that the holiday is a great excuse to reach out without, making, feeling a little awkward, anything. So, and just start to, things start kind of evolve to more of the frequent conversation. And that was, to me, it was just wonderful experience this couple weeks. And I'm just looking forward to expand my genuine connection, not so much on social media, but in person, heart-to-heart connection. And who else? Hold on.
I believe Mia.
Ah, Mia. Okay. There you go,
Perhaps
Mia.
Nancy.
Take it.
Hi, everybody. Mia, pronounced as she, her. I am in Ramaytush Ohlone land, otherwise known in San Francisco. But in my heart, I also carry Lenape land, which is New Jersey and Filipino. Hey, Jersey. What brings me joy for 2023 is releasing the future. So it brings me excitement and a lot of peace. And Nancy, I'll pass it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here in the kitchen at the Institute. My pronouns are she and her and hers. What brings me joy is my sons, Alex and Chris, and I look forward to serving them in the year ahead. Thank you. Am I the last, I think, perhaps? I don't see anyone else.
I think you are our final person. Thank you so much, Nancy, for sharing. Thank you all
Thank you.
for sharing. It's great to be here with you all on this Saturday. I wanted to check in to hear from you individually or a representative about how things went in December, and also make space if there are questions or personal reflections that you want to bring into the space before we get into our work. We'll spend our time today looking at the yamas and the niyamas and their relation to social activism. And we will spend time talking about and writing about change for today. But before we get into that, if you have questions or thoughts, this is the time.
I do have a couple questions. I haven't been able to join the live sessions, but I have been watching some recording. So sort of catching up with my questions, if you don't mind. I think one of the sessions you were talking about privilege. And I wanted to bring up the one of the privilege of not having to be labeled by your appearance, like I've been co-teaching and sort of doing some mentorship from the graduates of the BIPOC teachers. And one of the things that doesn't sit quite well for me is the term BIPOC or POC. And I don't know, like I came from Jersey, the group that my environment was diverse, that term was not needed. And it was until I moved to San Francisco that, oh, you're a person of color. And that just doesn't sit well with me. And I think I do understand that it's necessary to have this label so that there is a safe space for folks to gather within, I also feel like I wrangle with this term and I play with non-white, but then I understand that we don't want to make the, white folks feel excluded, which saying BIPOC, we're sort of like acknowledging that we've been excluded all this time. So I wanted to know if you could speak to that a little bit and sort of help me come to terms with this discomfort in this term.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that forward, Mia, and thanks for being here live and watching the recordings. and for mentoring these BIPOC teachers that are coming out of training. It's very needed. So I don't like the term either. Let me start there. But it's also because I identify as a Black person. I don't have a problem being called a Black person. I like to be called a Black person. And for me, as a Black person, that is mostly about reconnecting myself with all the other Black people who are displaced from the continent of Africa through generations. So my particular experience as a Black person is one, right, of like, I'll just share because I'm an expert in me. I'm a Black person raised in the American South by other Black people, and my ancestors entered the US through enslavement. And I know this through research and paperwork. And so I don't have a known direct ancestor on the continent of Africa. And also I know that's where my people came from. But when I call myself Black, what I'm saying is I am the same and in community with all the other Black people on every other continent who were displaced through any other like colonization. So like for me, I know Black people from the continent of India. I know a Filipino person who identifies as a Black Filipino person. Like I identify with all these Black people. I'm saying that to say, in the same way that I ask you all your names and pronouns, when we're building community with one another, we have to be in a really good practice of being able to name who we are for ourselves and that be honored by the other people in the space. And because we live in a system that centers whiteness as the normal standard way of being in so many ways, we come to have these other terms, right? And I would say that particularly for those of us who identify as not white, I don't have a problem saying this is a, like I often teach, and what you might see at the end of it or at the bottom or on the registration pages, this is a Black autonomous space, meaning it's for Black people, led by Black people, and only Black people can be in this space. Do I get emails from white people saying I'm excluding them from the space? Of course I do. Do I pay any attention to them? No, I do not. Because I'm not telling them they can't meditate. They can, or whatever it is I'm doing. They just can't do it with me at that time because I'm holding a particular space. So what I would say is for those of us who identify as not white, whether you identify as a Black person, a multiracial person, Asian person, whatever, you should be able to name for yourself. And also I think this term of BIPOC is highly overused, not very nuanced, and erases people. And so, you know, within your ashram, within your mentorship programs, within your teaching spaces, and just like community, it's more the space of, can you honor that white people are not the majority on the planet. The global majority is a non-white global majority. So sometimes you'll hear people say people of the global majority, which I actually prefer to when we're talking about non-white people, because then it gives me this, for myself visually, it gives me this picture of like, I just imagine like all the continents and all the different iterations of not whiteness that exist. So there's that term, right? People of the global majority. And also people got problems with that. So you're going to have to decide for yourselves what feels true to you, what feels right to you, what feels most accurate to you. And for me, I'm mostly focused on or thinking about how to include the most amount of underestimated or under-resourced people, which across the globe are usually people of the global majority, also referred to as BIPOC. But you'll never see Kelly refer to herself as a BIPOC person. I'm a Black person. And I'll never refer to another person as a BIPOC person. If I'm in direct relationship with you, then I would say, you know, how do you identify, and like, what communities do you feel, you might hear me in different places say like the communities you feel accountable to and connected to. So I might ask that for people to give me more information. These are options for language, because also then we run up against white people asking non-white people a very problematic question, which is, where are you from? Which is really an indication of, you can't be from this place, so tell me the place that you're from. And sometimes people say like, well, I didn't mean it in that way. And it's like, of course you didn't. This is a subconscious messaging that because this person looks a particular way, they can't be from San Francisco. They got to be from somewhere else, and they're just living here. So those are other questions to ask people, like what communities do you feel a part of or accountable to? How do you identify? How would you like to see me in the world? Or how would you like for me to see you in relation to the rest of the world? What identities do you feel connected to? And this is an opportunity for people to tell you who they are. I hope that helps.
Yeah.
In terms of like helping people not feel excluded, it's not really the responsibility of non-white people to help white people with their feelings around race. Hopefully they have a practice, right? And so the language I often use for people is like, I need you to use your practice to do a little self-study around why not being allowed into a space that has a specific intention feels harmful to you. And the reality is it's because of dominant culture, or the perceived dominant culture of whiteness says that white people should have access to everything. It always is that. They are not used to being told no. And that's not the reality of people that are not white all over the world. We are not sure if we're welcome in a space all the time and have to insert ourselves into spaces where we aren't welcome and also not safe. So it's not going to be hard work for white people to just honor those spaces. And if it's helpful, I can share an article with you all called Why People of Color, the term is in there though, Why People of Color Need Their Own Healing Spaces. And it really goes in depth and is a great resource that I often just reply to people with when they accuse me of reverse racism, being divisive, excluding. It's like, there are conversations that, for instance, Black people are not going to have in front of white people. It's just not going to happen. It's not safe for us to do it. And it can be traumatic to have to explain things that other Black identifying people just already get without you having to name it exactly. And we deserve to have access to those spaces the same way. And sometimes I'll say to people like, do you have the same like feeling about sports that are just for people in wheelchairs? Because this is their lived reality. They use a wheelchair and they need to be able to connect with one another in a space just with people in wheelchairs, led by people with wheelchairs. The same for when we say like, well, this is a women's group. It's like, nobody has a big stink about it. It's only when we bring race or ethnicity into it and self-seclude that people start to say like, well, you're excluding people. Again, you can meditate anytime. In fact, in the Western world, meditation world is set up for your comfort and joy. We're just simply creating a space that honors the identities and experiences of this particular people. You can meditate wherever you want to. And usually that helps people, not always, but sometimes.
Could I add a little bit more to that? On an organizational level, like, are we just stuck on these terms for now until we like 7 generations? We don't need to make these like
Yeah.
you know, as an organization, we want to be a beacon and call on to folks like, hey, this is your space. And the lead term is BIPOC or POC.
I mean, the two terms that I normally see are BIPOC or people of the global majority. Personally, I prefer people of the global majority, but also some people don't like that term either. So you're, as an organization, like specifically your organization, you need to decide that for yourselves. And in our very last session, we'll be making a lot of space for you all to think about those types of things. But yeah, we are. We're kind of stuck there because it's, I actually was just having this conversation over the weekend with the people I was on retreat with. As much as we would want to say that everyone is a human, it is very important to name the real things that impact people's ability to exist. And right now, and for the foreseeable future, race is one of those things. And so it does need to be named. As the global majority grows, will we need this term? I don't know, because eventually everyone might be what is termed POC, but.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Are there other thoughts or questions? Yeah.
I'll share a thought. It's not just that I remember when I first heard the term BIPOC, I didn't know what it meant when I first heard it. And so when we started using it, we had to put in parentheses what it stands for. So I'm just thinking that, yeah, if we want to switch to a different way of referring to the people of the global majority or some other term, we just have to define it. But we don't have to be stuck on using BIPOC. The other comment I wanted to make, Kelly, is from one of the things that you recommended we listen to was a TEDx talk by Michelle Cassandra Johnson. And we talked about that in December. I don't remember that well what we talked about in December. That seems like a long time ago. But I do remember that the interview you did with Amber Carnes and the Accessible Yoga podcast brought up some of the same issues in my mind and I think it more clearly connected racism with capitalism than I'd ever thought of before. I think many of us have been in the last 4 or 5 years really talking about the climate emergency and how tied that is to capitalism. And so some of us started this little group called the Spiritual Action Initiative, where we're trying to raise awareness about climate change and the way that it's connected to other factors. And it just, that podcast really more clearly connected racism right into that whole kind of combination of factors that are harming people all over the world in the name of making money. I just never made that connection so strongly. It felt useful to hear that and to understand that, but also felt like, oh my gosh, this is such a huge structure that's has so much power in our world that it kind of made me a little depressed about how that might change. I just want to share that.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that, Ramananda. I think I've said it to you all before that I am a person who feels hopeful most of the time. And also when I sometimes, like, I re-listened to my own interview. I hadn't listened to it, I just did it and it was out in the world. And I re-listened to it before I recommended it for you all to read or listen to. And yeah, I feel hopeful because I see many people around me that I know and I don't know choosing to interrogate how capitalism is harming others. And also it's still a very big, all-encompassing system. I haven't watched the news in like a week and a half because I've been at a retreat. And I choose not to like engage media while I was there. But also I know all kinds of weird and horrible things have happened in the world in the last 10 days since I've been off the internet that are connected to capitalism. And what I just try to remember for myself, particularly in relation to like climate change and racism, to me are heavily impacted and connected because people of the global majority will bear the brunt of climate disasters as they already have been for much longer than, like, let's say people in the US. And then the people in the US are the main ones creating the pollution that is harming the rest of the world. And I try to, and I have a practice of being in really authentic conversation with the people that trust me most. So my children, my parent, my extended family, my siblings, my close friends, about what they are willing to do right now, like just one small thing to be different in how they are consuming. And for my family this year, it was Christmas. I was like, I know this is a big thing that we have loved for a long time. And we are in this moment not in need of anything. We all have housing, we all have clothes, We all have the things. The children have toys. What would it mean for us to just not participate in Christmas shopping? And not everybody stuck to it. It was way more pared down than what it could be. But what people said was what I really knew, that they had a story that not getting people something would be a reflection of their feelings for that someone. And that just started us in a conversation of who benefits from that story, that the way that we show our care is to participate in capitalism, which for some people it was easy to digest, other people it wasn't. So I'm sharing that to say, I try to keep a balance of my hope by being around other people who get it and who want to talk about it and who want to be in practices, and inviting the people I care about to think about it. Because if we all hold the story of like, I'm just one person and I can't do a thing, then we're all holding the story. And so like I said to my parent the other day, if every person I know stopped using plastics to wrap their foods in, this substantially decreases the amount of plastics that are being wrapping food. And so I'm just going to keep talking to people about it. Like, that doesn't need a wrapper because it already has a wrapper. Like it's an apple, it has a wrapper on it that came naturally. It doesn't need to be in a plastic bag. And like, just consider that when you're grocery shopping. And already in 2023, I've had so many of my family members say to me, like, I'm glad you said that at Thanksgiving, or I'm glad you said that in the email, or I'm glad you talked to me about that on the phone. I'm trying to pay closer attention when I'm in the grocery store and make sure that I'm not like getting things in a wrapper when I don't have to. Some things they just can't avoid because plastic's everywhere, but they're at least trying. And like that helps me to like buoy me. But also we have this practice, non-attachment, that is an integral part of our spiritual practice. And so as long as we're in right action, I don't have to worry about when it's gonna like change. I just know that it is. Does that make sense to you? Otherwise, I would just go in the woods and never talk with anyone again. It's like, oh, we're screwed. Because that's how I feel sometimes when I watch television or like look at my children's homework worksheets. I'm like, oh, this is what they're teaching all the kids. We are certainly still in much trouble. But also I have two young people who I'm told by their teachers to really advocate for social action in their classroom on a daily basis. And I know that there are other people raising their children in that way. And these are things, again, that give me like hope. But in your work, like in this work that y'all are doing, if there are moments individually where you're like, Kelly, I feel a lot of like not hope, you're welcome to reach out to me individually through email. I'm happy to share with you the things that I do read or watch that remind me. What I tell people is like, that remind me of what's real and what's really possible. I got 1,000 videos, books, documentaries, writings by other people that just remind me of like, I'm not the only person trying to like do this. In fact, on screen right now, I'm with 11 other people that are trying to change the material conditions that we have here on the earth. And that'll be what gives me hope for today on Saturday. Yeah, go ahead, Snehan. Thank you, Ramananda, for that.
Yes, thank you both. Thank you for being here again, Kelly. I just want to say it's one thing for white people, or let's say people who are perceived to be white, because that's the way I feel. I feel like I'm perceived to be white, so I have to identify myself that way, whatever. But it's one thing for white people to feel uncomfortable at or feel excluded, right, from some group. I'm really grateful for the Black and Hispanic parties that I go to when I visit New York, because I'm way in the minority there. It's always been that way. And it gives me that feeling that I love of inclusion in something that's otherwise not like what I'm normally used to here. So it's one thing to be made to feel a little bit excluded or uncomfortable. It's another thing to receive outright hatred, like racist hatred based on the way I look. And I mean, I've experienced that because I've done a lot of travel and I put myself in these situations, and for the most part, it happened while I was living in Hawaii because it's expressed there. But I never felt like all the Polynesian people or the Hawaiians were racist. And it's a kind of a justified hatred also. So I'm just like, as a practical thing, we have a lot of perceived to be white people here in this 11 group of 11. So I like, when it happens to me, I don't really deal with it. I don't know if I internalize it. I don't think about it too much, and it doesn't feel great, but I just like try to forget it. When that happens to me, racism as a white person is automatic. That's all I have to say. You have anything to say?
Yeah, I just want to add or interject that I don't actually hold for myself, Kelly, that Black white people can experience racism, just from the space that racism is connected to social and economic like power. And
I see.
unfortunately, all over the world, non-white people don't have that, even in places where they are in majority. Like you could think
Yeah.
about the continent of Africa or different countries that make up Asia. Even though these are majority, what you might like ethnically look at, racially look at, like, oh, these are all Asian people or mostly African people, because of colonization, global colonization by Europe that has been happening for 1,000 years, and because of the economic power that the US imparts on every other country in the world, there's not a white place a white person can go and not be able to stand in their whiteness for some safety and protection. That's not to say that white people don't experience prejudice or harm, but it makes me think of an article. I would have to find it, but it basically was talking about the difference between white terror and Black fear. And it is this notion that starting very early, there's an indoctrination of white people or white presenting people to be afraid of darker people. They're barbarians, they're brutal, they're savage, they're killers, they have no humanity, no spiritual practices, no culture. Like, these are the stories. And it was based in nothing, made up science, pretend stories, and outright lies, right? And this is documented all over the place. I think we talked about the documentary Exterminate All the Brutes before. He talks a lot about it in there. So white terror in a lot of ways is like not real. This story that Black and brown people, indigenous people just automatically want to hurt you. But it fuels how Black and brown and non-white people have been treated all over the world for 1,000+ years. And also, I have no problem saying that I am very cautious in my interaction with white people, in business, in life, in traffic, in housing, in renting Airbnbs, in being out late at night in a neighborhood where I'm not in the majority. And that is not a terror, that's based in real knowledge about what could happen to me if, for instance, a white person was to say that I made them feel unsafe. And unfortunately, in my 42 years of life, that knowledge is taught to me from my parents and caregivers, not as like a don't like white people, but as a, like my grandpa used to say to me all the time, there's no reason for you to be afraid of white people. You must be aware of what they're capable of and what their systems allow. And so, like, I appreciate him telling me that. And as a parent raising two visibly Black people, I have to say to them, like, I value you. I see you as a magical thing. And also, they may not. And also, there are systems in place that say you can't, essentially the same thing my mom used to say to me, you can't do everything that your white friend does because you're not a white person and it won't be perceived in the same way. So all I would say is, like, I want to be clear that racism really is about more than just race and prejudice, but about prejudice coupled with social and institutional power. And lots of people, particularly Black people, get called racist when all they're doing is like either telling a truth, sharing a perspective, or putting up a boundary. Like saying this yoga class is only for Black people. The amount of times I've been called racist for that. And it's like, I don't control all of yoga. I just control the 60 minutes that I'm teaching. And I'm not even being really paid for it. So there's no financial or institutional power backing this. It's just me, Kelly, wanting to have a place where Black people feel safe to practice yoga with one another. And I have to make that an all Black space for that to happen. Yeah, that's what I would say about it. But I would also say, like, you know, as a white person, as you are, if you are identifying as a white person, or if others are seeing you as a white person in a space, and there is resistance or outright naming of not wanting you in the space, I wouldn't take that personally as a person. I would take that as a reminder of the work that still has to happen in communities, and use it as an invitation to be in listening, to be in collaboration, to be of service. And not service of like, oh, look what I could do for you, but service of, I'd like to be helpful, and I know that my presence might be harmful. So what is the best way for me? Can you tell me what type of help you would like from me?
That's great. I get it. That's
Yeah,
really
yeah,
useful, and I appreciate it. But also, you spend a lot of time talking about white people can't feel racism. I don't mind that. That's fine.
yeah,
But more, I was talking about hatred. So
yeah,
it's a discomfort with outright hatred
yeah,
for the way I'm perceived. I mean, don't call it racism.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, let's just
We
take
could,
that
yeah,
out. I'm glad that you
yeah,
gave that
and
talk,
yeah,
because we need
yeah,
to hear that we can't feel
yeah,
that way.
yeah,
But please, yeah.
yeah. And I would say too that, like, I have particular feelings for myself about hatred, and most of it is knowing that it's rooted in fear. So even what you might perceive, even what I perceive as a Black person as hatred from someone who's a proclaimed white supremacist, I don't actually look at it as like, oh, this person has a fire against me. This person has a fear of something that they've been socialized to be afraid of. Is it rooted in terror? Because whiteness being afraid of Blackness is rooted in terror. Yes. And in the instance of like a not white person saying like, I don't like white people, or I don't want to be around white people, there could be so many reasons for that. And also it's rooted in a historical experience and a fear that is passed down. And so how can we have compassion towards people to say to ourselves, not even to them, like, oh, these strong feelings that you have aren't about me as an individual, but are about a system. And I am going to play a part of disrupting that system so that in 7 to 10 generations, this is not a thing. Yeah. It
Can I
reminds me, go ahead, Mia. Go ahead.
like to add, recently I've been delving into Black American history, and last night I was watching a documentary on Marcus Garvey. Like, I've heard his name before, but I really didn't know what he was about. And, he sparked the concept of Black pride, ignited, Nation of Islam, Rastafarian movement, and also sort of warranted the creation of FBI to protect the white supremacist system. And I took this course a couple years ago on the history of the police, and actually the police was created to capture runaway slaves. That's the foundation of police. And so I think it helps to get that point of reference of like when we talk about the system, it is a real system. It is enforced, like not just financially, but with weapons and through law. So
Yeah.
that's important to also have that
Yeah.
reference.
I think it's important to name it and to know that, like, sometimes for me as a person who has worked in like DEI or like race equity work, like we're doing together, sometimes it can feel frustrating even through like literature and TED Talks and everything, because we say like the system, like it's this unmanned thing that has these unforeseeable outcomes that people are now trying to live with. And it's like, could you hold that the whole thing was created to show up exactly as it's showing up right now? So none of it is a coincidence. It's not by happenstance that we have more houseless people now than we've ever had. It was always designed to destabilize people's resources and keep us engaged in something that would oppress us, regardless of your identity. And, like that's an important part of understanding capitalism too, of like, we all participate in it. And also, if people who sit with a closer proximity to power, in the instance of the US, white presenting people, said, we're not doing this. We're not going to make people pay for, these are just dreams I have. We're not going to charge people for housing or food or water because we know that they need it as humans, and you shouldn't have to earn your ability to exist. You should just be allowed to exist, right? That's the dream Kelly has. But if people closest to dominant culture said that, then this has much greater impact than people not close to power saying it. And how do I know? Because people not close to power have been saying it for more than 1,000 years. It's not a new thing that people have been trying to figure out how to make sure that people are resourced. And so that could feel overwhelming, but also it should feel very empowering, because if this is your first time thinking about it, like how Ramananda was saying, this is their first time like putting capitalism and racism together in that way. If it's your first time putting it together in that way or thinking about it in that way, I'm not saying like, oh, the answer is socialism or communism or anything. I actually don't think the answer exists in this current moment. But if people could look at the fact that we have the ability to explore new options, this is our opportunity to invite more people into it. It's like, oh, I haven't thought about capitalism. And I appreciate you, Mia, saying like, you're studying on your own. No one's making you study, and you went and you watch these things about Marcus Garvey. It's like, this is the piecemeal work that ends up being big work of exposing yourself to as many different historical reference points, exposing yourself to as many perspectives as possible around something that you hold true, even when you don't agree with it. It's like, I do a lot of study around Blackness and queerness. It's because I'm having an experience as a Black queer person. And I want to have a better understanding of like where this happened, where this has gone, and so I can think about where it will go. But that also means I end up having lots of conversations about Blackness and queerness with people. Sometimes they want to, and sometimes they don't. A lot of times people don't hold the same perspectives as me. I still take it all in because I want to understand. And so like, you all have that invitation too of like, oh, for instance, if you were born and raised in America or have been socialized through our educational system, capitalism has been normalized for you as this like self-sustaining model. It's not a self-sustaining model. There's a few people who have control over our economy. They make it go up and down when they need it to. And so what happens when the people agree they don't want to participate anymore? They can't work that way. But the only way we get the critical mass of people to look at it is to keep talking about it. And the same is true across all of those. Of like, I don't know what money system exists outside of socialism. I'm not looking for a new money system, but I am trying to think about how do we make sure all the humans have food, all the humans have housing, all the humans have care and water. That might not include money for me. I saw your hand, Sarani. You can go ahead.
So my question is kind of shifting in my mind, or maybe it's two different questions, but one, like I watched The Canary Effect this week, I don't remember, a few days ago, and it's just stayed with me. And it's, for those of you who haven't watched it, it's one that Kelly recommended, and it's about just the darkest parts of colonization of Indigenous people in the US and how the history of it, and kind of a timeline of the atrocities. And it's really, really, it's been very hard for me to take in and let go. And that's really where my question is. You were saying, well, today there's these people talking, but if I do like Mia, where I really go in and study or get, like, I'm involved in the spiritual action initiative with Ramananda, and climate change has been a focus. And at some point I just have to stop because I get too anxious, and I use my practice, and maybe this leads us into the yamas and the niyamas. But I also feel like it's just too much for one person to bear. You know what I mean? And this is so helpful to me to see these people gathered together, trying to make sense of it and trying to figure out what how we can have some sort of impact and make changes, but I also feel like this isn't enough. And I worry so much about the future for my kids and grandkids. And it's just kind of always constantly in the background for me. And I'm feeling teary right now talking about it. I just would like you to help me with that, I guess.
Thank you for naming that. First, The Canary Effect is a really difficult documentary. It took me about 4 times to get through it the first time I watched it, which was probably a decade ago. And also, I'll just share for myself, like what my own personal practice is around things like that. Whenever I'm going to watch something like that, I try to time it at a time of day that gives me spaciousness from my morning meditation and grounding practices before my bedtime. So you're never catching Kelly watching something like this at nighttime. It's going to keep me from sleeping. And so I know for myself, that's not something that I should do. The other is that I have a really strong writing practice. I believe in getting what's inside of me out onto paper. And so I spend a lot of time writing. And also I have a really strong grief practice. And sometimes people shy away from grief and sadness because it is an intense emotion to navigate. And also I am finding that my ability to just name that, on today, I feel sad about the state of the world. And so it's going to lessen my impact to be able to engage certain things, makes it possible for me to know I won't feel like that the next day or in an hour or 2 hours. And I try to engage in things like that with other people. So, I think I've shared before, my partner is also a race and equity educator, or has been. We both are retiring from this work. But when I watch things like that, I'm usually watching it with them and other people. And we'll watch it and then we'll say like, okay, let's do something else, like listen to music or make food or go for a walk. And we'll talk about this at, tomorrow morning after breakfast, or talk about it as our thoughts come up around it. I also just have a practice of having a lot of gratitude when I feel discomfort, because it's a reminder for me that my humanity is still on board. Anytime you can watch something horrible and be like, oh, that's so horrible. What y'all want to eat? It's like, you might not be as connected to your humanity as you should be. And I, of course, don't want people to experience discomfort. And also our practice says that our growth and change comes from our ability to have capacity for it. So, I think, Sarani, you and Alan, it seems you have a family that's really close and connected. And I have had the experience mostly recently of trying to talk with my own parent about climate change. My mom's 69, she'll be 70 this year. I gotta plan her party. I keep saying it to myself so I won't forget. But she didn't turn 70 this year, and she has 2 grandchildren. They both happen to be my children. And the conversation started because she asked my 9-year-old what it is they imagine that they will be when they're an adult. And they said, I'll tell you what I imagine. And I also hold that I might not be able to live on the earth by the time I'm an adult. And my mom felt like that was strong language for a 9-year-old to have that concept, for them to possess that. And I don't have a practice of lying to my children. So we've had multiple conversations about what the world might be like by the time they're adults. And I think that for my mom, it was jarring, because what she ended up saying to me is that she, one, had to reconcile the choices that she's made in terms of consumption and plastics and fossil fuels and all of that, and reckoning that it could negatively and be disastrous for something that she cares so much about, which is the future of her grandchildren's lives. And also, it got her to agree to only eat meat once a week. So I'm saying it to say, use that discomfort as fuel to invite other people you care about into this uncomfortable place, because this is how we awaken the mass. This is how we awaken a critical mass of people to say, like, okay, I'm going to do something different. Because most of my family ignores me about climate change. But the minute I said, like, okay, you know, all these children that y'all love, how old will they be in 2050? Let's forget ourselves. Let's just think about how old will they be in 2050? And they're saying that we won't have fresh water in over 97% of this country, ability to grow food or even be outside if we don't do something right now. And then it like made people be like, okay, Kelly, tell me how to not shop with plastics. Tell me how to, but we first had to have that really hard conversation. And, you know, some of my relatives have cried about it. They've argued with me, they've hung up on me, they told me I'm being too much. Why do you have to bring this up all the time? And I'm like, you can't ask me about how my kids are doing and then also want to ignore a conversation about not buying plastics. They're not doing great because they might not be able to live on the earth when they're adults. And this helps people. That's how I can talk to my family. They know me. But for you all, just use that discomfort as fuel, as an invitation, right? Of like, you know, later, Sarani, you might interact with some of your adult children. And when they ask you, like, how are you feeling? Or whatever they do to check in, this is the time to say, I watched this documentary and it makes me feel so sad. And these are the reasons why. And you should watch it also. And I'd love to talk to you about it afterwards. Like, this is, I think we've talked about it, this like authentic expression. And we're going to get into it a little bit more in just a minute. We talked about the yamas and the yamas, but it's this invitation to not share the discomfort, but share it. Because it is too much for one person to hold. There's 8 billion of us on the earth, give or take. So if we share the knowledge and load of it, then this becomes less work for us as individuals. And like, I have to remember that too.
I just want to add one sentence, and that is that I invite everybody here to, as my Sangha, as our Sangha, to continue to talk about this and have ways of supporting each other in this. So,
I want to also just say one sentence. Thank you, Sarani. That when I said earlier, you know, I didn't want to sound like that whiny white person that can't handle any discomfort. It's not that. It's that I feel more of it coming. I feel more of it is inevitable. So not so much for me, I'm not even going to be here that much longer. But like you said, the children and everybody else, even there's young people here today, younger than me, that are likely to experience this. And so what you have said about that, sharing it, allowing it, being okay, and then that statement of I'm still willing to be a part of the dismantling, I mean, that's the part that's just going to blow everybody away, especially if it comes from somebody who's privileged and benefited from all of it. It's just not right.
Thank you for naming that, Sneha. Thank you for naming that. I want to say, like, and I'm pretty sure I said it to you all in the beginning. This work is heavy and it's lifelong work. So it's more releasing of like, oh, I'm going to get it right every single day, and more of pulling in of like, I'm going to engage it every single day. And engaging it is going to look different for each of us depending on identity, but also just your capacity, right? For what is or isn't happening, you know, and in my sharing, like more broadly, that I'm not doing this work anymore, I've had like a lot of different reactions, but some people say like, it's getting to be too much for you. It's like, no, it's not that actually. It's that it doesn't feel like the best use of my energy at this time to engage it in this way anymore. I've done it for 10 years. And also, I hope other people continue doing it. I'm mentoring other Black people who want to do this work to help them to be in it. And so I'm saying that to you all to say that you may have 2 good weeks. When I say good weeks, I mean weeks of like reading things, talking about things, coming up with new ideas. And then you may read or take in something that is just like, And it takes you a little while because really what is happening is you're having to grieve a reality, right? It's like last summer when the redwood forests were burning, I've had a lifelong dream of going there, and I probably will have that opportunity, and also I might not. And so it was like I was watching the news and I just had like a full meltdown. And for 2 weeks, I was just really sad every time I even saw like trees in Jersey of like we've ruined the earth. Like we've ruined the earth. And then also I came out of it with some ideas about how to be in better alignment for myself. But it also was because I just honored how I was feeling. I had honest conversations with people about it. People offered me different things to read and watch. And the benefit you all have is that you are in a Sangha together. And so if each of you is just making the commitment to stay engaged around it, even if it's for 2 years, I'm just trying to learn as much as I possibly can. This moves us forward. And, I say to people like, think about the first time when you went to yoga and you were like me, I got forced. And you were like, oh, it's gonna be fun. It's cool, like a good thing. It's like a workout we could do together. Sure, fun. But then after I like learned about the practice, after I like learned the philosophy, like I can't keep this to myself. It's changing my material conditions here. And this is the same. This is just an extension of this practice. And I look at it that way because all of the sacred texts say that this is the work of offloading the story of the world and being in true alignment with yourself and creation. We cannot do that while racism, capitalism, homophobia, transphobia, patriarchy, oppression exists. No one can be whole. And so this work is just about, it's much about like how you show up in the world, but also like how you're healing yourself from growing up in this traumatic environment that we call the earth. We've all been traumatized by it. And so part of it is healing that. And to do it, you've got to learn what has actually traumatized you. There's this documentary, I can't find it on the internet anymore. I don't know why they took it away. Well, I know why they took it away, but it's called, oh man. It's a DW documentary, which DW is a European like documentary company, but it was about the history of working. Burnout, that's the name of it. It's called Burnout. So maybe you could find it on the internet if you like Google Burnout DW documentary. But it talks about how we get to the history of working. And I watched this probably in October. And literally when it turned off, I was like, oh, so I'm done with working. Like, of course I'm not. I'm working right now because I got bills to pay. And also, I have to make a plan where working is not a part of my life, because as long as I agree to this, I'm agreeing to oppression, because it was formulated to oppress people. The idea of you need to leave where you live to work for the things that you need where you live. Before that, people lived where they lived and they worked on the things they needed to live, like shelter and food, and they traded with others, and people had skills and gifts that they might use to barter particular things. But then all of a sudden, resources, land primarily, was taken from people, and those in power said, if you want your land back, you got to work for us. And I don't know why I hadn't thought about that before, but it made me know that if it existed before, it can exist again. I can make a way for myself and others to experience that. But I'm saying that to say, watching it was really uncomfortable. I didn't know what to do with it for several days. Now I don't want to go to work, but I got to go to work. I just end up talking about it with my coworkers. Like, hey, coworker, let me send you this documentary about working. Every person I know who has a job, which is everybody, let me send you this documentary about working, because this is how we slowly, maybe in a few generations, like I say to my children all the time, I hope that when you're adults, you can do what it is you'd like to do because you like to do it, not because you need it to pay for a place to live or food to eat. I think it's possible. Yeah. I want to jump into connecting our practice to this work that we're doing. And I don't want to make assumptions, but is there anyone here who would like to talk about the meanings of the yamas and the niyamas? Because we're going to do a group activity around how these yamas and niyamas can be used to disrupt systems. But I don't want to assume that people know what the yamas and the niyamas are. And also, if you're like, I'm not saying that live over Zoom with everybody
Yeah.
in my Sangha, you could put private
There
message
are,
me in the chat.
there are probably several people here that could do this, that have taken Raja
Okay.
Yoga and could
Okay.
easily talk about that. So,
Okay, perfect. I don't like to assume, but I want to put it out there. So what we're going to do is go into small partner groups, 1 to 2 other people. And I've made something called a jam board. I put the link in the chat here. It is a board for us to curate our thoughts. Have we used it here together yet? Okay. So they are boards. There's 1 page for each yama and niyama. They're listed in order, the yamas first and the niyamas second. I'm going to give you and the people that you're in partnership with all the way till 3 o'clock to talk with one another about some of the actions that you might be able to take in the name of racial equity or just social justice, disrupting oppression in connection with these yamas and niyamas, right? So I'll give an example. Santosha, right? We normally consider this as around contentment, right? And also to me, this often speaks to what you were just naming, Sarani, of like, I need to be content with the fact that I am a finite individual who can only do what I can do. So I don't have to try to overwhelm myself with things that are outside of my capacity. On today, I'm going to be content with the action of reading something new and discussing that new thing with someone else. Just an example. Or like I mentioned to you all before, my decision to stop doing this work is very much rooted in brahmacharya, which I look at as conservation and right use of energy. And I'm a finite being with a certain amount of energy and time on this earth. My impact could be infinite, but I am finite. And so I can't do this work because there's other work that feels better in alignment for me. So I have to stop teaching in this way because of brahmacharya. But that could look like other practices of brahmacharya I've had are like, although money and currency systems sit outside of us, they are very much attached to our ability to participate in spaces. And so how I use my money is also brahmacharya. Some people say like they vote with their money. I do everything with my money. I vote with my money. I give away with my money. I support other people who are under-resourced with my money, whether it's through their business or just giving money to other people who need it. I'm not rich, but what I often say to people is if I have it to save, I have it to give away. And so it's what I do. Don't tell my mom though, she'll be really mad that I don't really save money like that anymore. But it's just, it seems futile to me. I'm always like, the world could end tomorrow. What am I going to do with thousands of dollars? Give it to other people so they can eat today. And so like, these are the types of examples. With that being said, there's no right or wrong way to engage this. Each group will be working on the same boards. So you may see other people putting words onto the board. Don't pay attention to that. Just put your words onto the board and you do it really easily. I'm going to share screen just so you all can see. So like here's a himsa, right? To add notes, you can just click over here on this little sticky note, type, press save, and it goes on the board. Okay. And the benefit of this is when we meet next time and moving forward, you all will have access to saved versions of these and can use them as you all start to work on action plans for your different committees, organizations, and as individuals. Okay. Are there questions about this activity?
So just words in relation to, or
no, like tangible things that might be in alignment around ahimsa. So like an example of ahimsa is, I'll put it on here, asking for pronouns. You don't know people, you don't know who they are, you don't know how they see themselves or how they wish to be addressed in the world. But we're culturally usually encouraged to make an assumption that's based in heteronormative standards one of the ways that we as space holders and just humans can lessen the harm that we might cause in practicing ahimsa is to ask every single person what their pronouns are. I even ask people that I know really well, like my children, are those still your pronouns? Because they could change, and sometimes they do for my children, but I just ask people instead of making an assumption. So I hope that clarifies. So for each one, and this arrow at the top allows you to click through the boards. Okay. And they might be outward actions, right? But they are most likely going to be inward actions or actions that aren't something tangible for others, right? Like an example I could give you around like saucha, cleanliness, purity. I also look at it as clarity. So it's like I take time to make really clear decisions about what's in alignment for me as a racial equity educator. I don't teach in all spaces because that ain't good saucha. To be in like spaces where people are heavily resistant or just want to argue with me about it or aren't open to talking about this. I don't do that practice. And that might be the same for you. You've got somebody in your family who's overtly racist and very hostile. It might take some time before you engage them about this work. And it's fine to say that I'm going to focus on people I know who will be open and willing to listen. And that could go here on such. Does that make sense to y'all?
Well, that's how we get to.
Yep, there's a little arrow right at the top that'll allow you to click through the screens. Okay. I've already put you all in some small groups. If for some reason you're in a group or for some reason you can't participate, maybe because of where you're located or what you have going on, you could let me know that. And if you get into a group and your partner can't participate, just come back to the main room and I can put you into a room with someone else or with other folks. Okay. Are there any other questions before we get started?
Susan Ford.
Sorry, I just want to know if we could just take a little break. I feel like I
We
need
sure
to
can.
eat something before I can do this.
Okay, we sure
something
can.
simple, just a little bit.
Yeah, what we can actually do, it's the 18th minute where we are. What I'll say is, why don't we go ahead and take a break right now and come back at 30 minutes,
Okay,
right?
good.
And then I'll put you into the group.
Thank you.
And
Okay.
how
Yeah.
late are we going today? In Pacific time?
1 o'clock.
1, right? Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So yes, take your break. I'll see you back in about 11 minutes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No.
Welcome back. I am gonna open the room for you to pop in there. And we're still gonna stay until 3 for you to work with your partner groups on the Jamboard. Does anybody need me to share the Jamboard again? Okay, perfect. The rooms are open. Hi, David. Are you back from the break?